You said something about God's creation, and that's probably the most important thing out of all this. Like, this is God's creation, and it's our purpose to cultivate it and just to be in his creation. And if you want to feel close to God, if you want to experience him and just enjoy his creation, then grow a garden and pick your own vegetables.
A lot of the people that I read their stories of why they wanted to homestead, they said they felt a connection to nature and they felt disconnected. And there's a big push, I feel like, back to homeschooling, homesteading, just home. And I feel like that's God's design, is family, home.
To make our families more resilient and self-reliant, while understanding that community is necessary. Like, none of us are going to be able to just hole up in a bunker for the rest of our lives. And would you even want to begin with, if you really think about it? So community is more important to homesteaders, and focusing on improving the world we live in now. So a prepper mindset would be getting ready to weather the storm, and homesteaders would be thinking more along the lines of, how can I make my situation better right now?
I feel like our culture is taught that if you don't do good at something, like that's bad. And I think it's the opposite. I think if you don't do good at something, that can be a good thing because it can teach you what to change to do good at something. It can teach you problem solving skills. It can teach you things. So there's an appreciation for failures, not a, oh my gosh, I failed, I might as well just give up, forget this whole thing. Welcome back to the Homefront Faith Podcast. I'm so excited to be here. We're going to talk today in this episode about an exciting topic that some of you might be interested in. We are going to be talking about homesteading and living kind of a self-sustained lifestyle, and the importance of that, why we're interested in that, why we think it's a good idea. So we're going to get into all those topics today. So if you're new here, if you haven't seen any of our other previous podcasts, I'm Matt. This is my wife, April, and this is our friends,
Chase
and Erin.
And we are going to, we've got plenty of episodes. If you haven't seen it before, go back and check out what you introduced who we are in the very first episode and kind of some about our life. And we've talked about all kinds of different topics, but we want to talk about what's another part of our life, which is homesteading and kind of what we do in that regard. So we'll jump right in. I think kind of the first question that we should probably ask is, what is homesteading? What does that mean? I think a lot of people are looking into that now, and some people are interested in it, and some people have no idea what it means or what it is. So who wants to jump in first and just talk about what is homesteading in general?
Well, I think just to simplify it into two words, I would say probably subsistence agriculture. So it's basically just seeking to produce products that your family needs, as many of them as you can, from your own property or your own home, which is where the word homestead comes from. It's your own property, your home, and you're seeking to produce what your family needs from it. Basically, it's just trying to get back to how our great-grandparents lived. So if you go back even just one generation for some people, but 2-3 generations, everybody lived on farms. And I believe it's the 1800s. I've got it down here. In the 1800s, 90% of people lived on small homesteads in America. And in 1900, it dropped to 60%. And now in 2024, it's 2%.
Wow.
2% of the population lives on farms nowadays, and they make 87% of the food in America. So 2% of the population is responsible for making 87% of the food, which shows like the efficiency of modern agriculture in the big farms, and also that we import a lot of our food now. 13% is a lot of food to be importing from overseas.
Yeah, it is. Do you think, and everybody else can kind of jump in and give their thoughts on homesteading, but do you think, this is kind of a side question, but what do you think is the reason for the decline in?
I've read some different stuff on it. A lot of people, I'll give a personal example. My great-grandfather had a farm not far from here, and he had 10 kids. They all worked the farm as a big cotton farm, and they all either joined the military or did something to get away from the farm and get into town because it was like it's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And like they knew that they weren't all going to be farmers for their whole life, so they hurry up and got out of there. And that's kind of like what we saw was the previous generation before us. Obviously, we're millennials here, so the previous generation, what was the name, whichever one that is,
Gen X.
Gen X. The one before that, they all left the farms after World War II. They all left their farms, moved into the houses in the suburbs, had their kids there, which was Gen X. Now we see in the millennials and the Gen Zs, the ones that can afford housing these days, a return to homesteading, a return to the farms and agriculture where our great grandparents left the farms. So it kind of comes and goes in cycles.
Yeah, I did a lot of research on this, and it was saying that during World War II, there was a huge push from the government to like have backyard farms and have backyard chickens because like they were rationing meat and they were wanting the people to have their be self-sufficient. And then after World War II in 1946, like it was like the first year that so many people didn't do backyard gardens because it was kind of like, oh, we were so poor during the war and now we've, the war is over. Now we don't have to do like this gardening and stuff. Like it was almost like trying to show that those hard years of war were over. Yeah, but if you think about it, like 1945 really wasn't that long ago. And most Americans had a backyard garden and most Americans had chickens.
Yeah, I feel like, and Erin, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I think the idea of it being hard work. And so because it's hard work, when you associate hard work with going through the war and all the stuff that happened, there was this idea of hard years because the life is hard because the war and all that. And they associated the idea of the hard work with that. Mm-hmm. And so there was a break from it. Like I'm done with all the hard stuff because how hard it's been with the war. Erin, what are your thoughts on what is homesteading and why maybe we don't do it as much anymore?
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you guys. I think you guys covered it well, but it's like convenience is really appealing. Like if I don't have to go out and grow my own food, then, why would I? And I know we're going to get into, why we believe that we should, but that's probably why, people moved away from the farms and the gardens and the chickens. So, but yeah, I agree with you guys completely.
Yeah. Those the gardens in World War II, they were victory gardens, right?
Yeah, victory gardens.
They were called. They were doing all this rationing, so they're like, well, hey, you're only getting this many coupons to go to the grocery store. You should probably start your own garden so you don't starve to death.
Yep.
Yeah.
And imagine if that was nowadays with 2% of the population on farms.
People wouldn't know how. Like back then, they're like, okay, the government's like, do a garden and do chickens. Well, apparently they had enough knowledge to know how to do that. I feel like if the government told the people, they'd be like, what?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
I think most people have lost the skills. And luckily, and it's crazy to me because we're in a generation where information's at our fingertips. Yeah. And I think because of that, back then, you didn't have information at your fingertips. It was passed down, like the knowledge on how to do that. Whereas I feel like now we just think, oh, well, if we ever need it, it's out. Any information we need's out there.
Yeah.
So we don't pass stuff down. We don't teach these things. It's just kind of,
yeah.
And that's an interesting thing.
One of the flaws of modern society is like everything is so good. It's allowed us to become specialized.
Yeah.
So like you can just learn your job and that's it. You don't have to know how to cook. You don't have to know how to build carpentry. You don't have to know how to weld or garden or raise animals or anything because you can just hire somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
There's some specialist out there, like plumbers, for instance. Like plumbing under your sink is fairly easy, yet 90% of people will hire a plumber to come do it for them. Like if it's just a minor pipe break right under your sink, it would take like 15, 30 minutes to change out if you've got the stuff and the knowledge to do so. But like we're so specialized in our modern society that that's not even in a lot of people's minds that they could do it on their own.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that kind of leads into our story then. Why, both of us and our families are You guys have been doing this for a while and gotten, definitely way ahead of where we are.
It's Chase's fault.
It's Chase. We blame you for getting us. No,
I'm just saying he's like the first one that brought it up to you.
Yep.
He got you into it.
He did. And so what's our
like all good ideas?
Like all good ideas come from you. Yes. But what is our what's y'all's experience? And we'll kind of talk about us, but what's y'all's experience with homesteading? First of all, what got you into it? Like what experience led you to want to homestead? And then what kind of journey did you go on to get to where you are?
I'll just start with me personally, and then I'll let you take over.
Yeah.
I've kind of always been interested in it. I grew up very rural. Like we didn't have internet till I was 21 years old. So we grew up running around in the woods and in the pastures and all of that, but we never really had farm animals. And I always wanted that growing up. I've always wanted sheep and cows and chickens and all of that. And we never really had like agricultural animals. And so that was one of the things I always wanted to do when I got my own place and got married, was do that. And I've always talked about it, like as far back as I can remember. And then I met Erin and we got married.
Yeah. I guess we can have story time. That's what I told Chase this morning. Story time. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I met Chase, he talked a lot about how one day he wants to have cows and, do the whole homesteading thing. I don't even know if I knew what homesteading was at that point, though.
I probably didn't either.
I feel like that's a term that's really popular now. But I feel like I agreed with him. I thought that sounded great and everything, but I always saw it as kind of like a distant thing. Like, okay, yeah, we'll do that, but it's, not anytime soon. And then I feel like many people, when we had like all the shutdowns in 2020, it was kind of like my wake up call. I don't know about you, Chase, but not necessarily like the food shortages, which that kind of was like a wake up call, a factor. But I was talking to Chase about it this morning. Like, I was a teacher and our lives were so fast paced before, the shutdowns and 2020 happened. I was a teacher. We were both working full time. We drove an hour to church and we were at church 3 and 4 times a week. Our weekends were packed. Like, we were never at home. And then when everything shut down, like all of that was taken away. And it's like, everything was so like bare. It's like, okay, I'm just sitting at home right now. What do I do? Just like sit and watch TV all day. And like, you can ask Chase, I was kind of going crazy a little because like, I don't know if I was going through some kind of crisis, but I was like, what are we living for? Like, all of this is taken away. None of it matters. Like, what are we living for? And I'm not saying we live for homesteading now by any means, but it is a big part of our lives now. But I feel like, y'all know when 2020 came about, like the homesteading craze like blew up. Everybody was like making sourdough starters and everybody was planting a garden, which I think is great. But like, I started to realize like, hey, this is possible. At that time, we lived on 1/2 acre. And I always thought, well, one day when we have land, like that's when we can worry about it. But I started to realize, we got the book. It's called The Backyard Homestead, and maybe we can link it below. But it's like about how to grow all of your food on 1/4 acre. And I started reading that and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we can do this. So I was like, okay, Chase, like maybe we can think about getting some chickens. Like maybe we can get some seeds to plant. And like, then maybe like an hour later, we were going to Tractor Supply to get chickens. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know we were starting this today.
Huge garden that year.
Yeah. And I mean, we were home to do it. I wasn't going to work. Chase was still working at that point, but like, what else was I going to do? So that's when we really got started. I feel like still is my like domain of homesteading, I guess you could say. I feel like me and Chase both share in the gardening tasks. But like, I really started learning how to cook from scratch. So I started cooking from scratch, like just whole foods. Like, I'm still this way. I just shopped on the outside of the grocery store, produce, meat, dairy, like whole foods. And I started experimenting with sourdough, started fermenting, started learning how to can. Like, I just really like discovered this passion that I had for homesteading, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to point out here that we haven't always been doing this. Like, we're relatively new at it. Erin hasn't always cooked from scratch.
No.
She's always been a good cook. I'll say that.
Yeah.
She hasn't always like
I've come
made
a long
things from
way.
scratch. But and that's one thing that people need to consider too, especially as high as the grocery bills are these days.
Mhm.
Like, we spend, I don't know, maybe $90 at Aldi for 2 or 3 weeks of food, and then we buy meat once a month.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, it's a lot cheaper than most people spend because Erin is willing to take more time and cook with cheaper, or well, not cheaper ingredients, but more base ingredients, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. I feel like people think the groceries are so expensive, but a lot of it is like what they're buying. Because I love to watch like grocery hauls, like Costco
me
hauls,
too.
Walmart hauls. And these people are buying like so much pre-packaged snacks. They're buying cookies and they're buying those big boxes of like pre-packaged chips. And they're spending like hundreds of dollars on just pre-packaged junk.
Yes.
You don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, get your meats and your vegetables and your
Yeah.
fruit and your dairy. And that's just like how God, I feel like, designed our bodies to
Yeah.
eat anyways.
Also, too, like, you'll spend $10-12 on 3 bags of Doritos. You can buy like a whole bag of flour for that, and you can make tons of different
Yes.
breads.
Yes. And if it's up to you to make all of your snacks, you don't snack as much. So.
Yeah.
And I have a almost 1-year-old. So it is possible to have kids and not buy all the puffs and the pouches and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
possible. You just have to decide, what's a priority for you. And we'll get into more of that later. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause- oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, people ate for thousands of years. They didn't have packaged baby food in jars. They didn't have puffs. They didn't have potato chips, and they survived.
That's what I was going to say. It's relatively new, in human
Oh, yep.
culture.
Got the first real true supermarket came in 1930, and supermarkets hit the suburbs in the 50s and 60s.
So that's a new thing. Like,
So that's like our grandparents.
yeah, it's a
like,
relatively new
There was
thing
not
because
grocery stores in the suburbs
No.
before the 50s.
and
wow.
they didn't need them because they would do things at home.
They had a
would do-
butcher.
Yeah.
No, they didn't do everything. They had a butcher and stuff, and they'd go and get their milk like delivered.
Yeah,
and
the
stuff.
basics things. But my point is, like, for most of human history, almost all of human history has been not going and buying a prepackaged thing of cereal and a prepackaged thing of Debbie cakes and a prepackaged thing of whatever.
Mhm.
Most of human history has been eating your basic good foods. Most of human history has been things that you produce yourself. Like, seems like, and it's funny. I thought about this. We talk about homesteading and we act like it's, this, like you said, this is our great grandparents, the way our great grandparents lived. It's not a new thing. It seems new to a lot of people. It seems like a trend, like a new thing that people are discovering about homesteading, but it's not new. It's what most of human history really is. And so really the idea of homesteading is getting back to what we were designed for as humans.
It's community.
Yeah, it is
It's
community.
even like when those people before the 50s, when they needed meat, they went to the butcher. But like, oh, that's Earl the butcher. He lives right down the road. I know him. Like,
Yep.
Everybody knew each other. Like, you probably traded him cabbages for your hamburger meat that day or something along those lines. And that's where a lot of people get mixed up about homesteading, is it can become idealistic where, oh, I'm completely self-reliant.
Mm-mm.
There's no outside inputs. And like, that's just not the case.
That'd be great, but no.
You're never going to get there.
No.
If a tree falls on my fence and breaks my fence, I need some replacement parts for that, and I can't make it myself. Like, I've got to go to the hardware store and get a patch for that.
Right.
Like, it's going to take outside inputs.
It takes outside inputs. It takes community. And honestly, it works better. Homesteading works better when it's not just two people doing everything, but when you have a community of people that you can trade with, that you can work with, that maybe they have a certain type of animals, you have a certain type of animals that you can work. You know what I'm saying? It's the way humans were designed by God was for community. And so homesteading is built-in community. If you rely on each other and build a community around that, you're self-sufficient, but not self-sufficient in and of just yourself, but self-sufficient within your community. Your community is self-sufficient.
And that's really an American thing too. And don't get me wrong, I'm American to the bone, but we will be self-independent to our own detriment.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah, we won't don't realize that relying on others is not a bad thing, and we think dependence is bad, but it's not, as long as it's done correctly. So for us, as far as our journey we are nowhere near where you guys are, right? Because we're getting there. We
4 years ago we bought this house, but
Yeah.
4 years ago we lived in a third floor apartment.
Yeah,
And
so
kind of like the city, not really the city, but
it is a
not
city.
Y'all are in the city.
It was definitely not the country.
the edges of the city.
And let's
City I don't want to go to anymore because I'll get
Yeah.
shot.
just saying, to pull out of there, you sat for an hour waiting to get onto the road because there's so much traffic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was insane. But that was just 4 years ago. And then we bought this house and moved in this house, the house we're on now, without obviously I don't want to give too much details away, but the house we're at now,
You're gonna find
it's-
us.
we've got a few acres, and we've really spent most of our time that we've been here learning. It's been a learning season for us, learning different things. We've planted a few different things. We've done a few different things. We've trial and error on things, doing some sourdough here and there, messing up on sourdough. And if everybody's had sourdough starter, you know how that is.
I messed up a lot.
Right? So just doing different things.
Last year was our first year actually putting seeds in soil.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, enough talk, put the seeds
Yeah.
in the soil.
And so we've had that experience, and now we're about to move out onto 11 acres, and on that land, we'll be closer to you guys. We'll be able to do more community type stuff, and really take what we've been learning over the past few years and start moving into, okay, let's just dive in and do this. And so we're kind of a few years behind y'all, and which is great because that means we're learning from y'all.
Well, everybody's progressing. Like
Yeah.
we're nowhere near where we want to be.
Yeah, they're making it sound like we know it all. We do not.
Well,
So like
compared to us. Compared to us.
so 4 years ago is when we started, right?
Yeah.
All the 2020 stuff. So since then we've done hundreds of chickens, like meat birds, egg layers, everything you can imagine. And we have pigs right now, and they're due to be slaughtered next month. So they'll go to the butcher then. We have sheep. We're really trying to grow our sheep flock right now. We have 2 wethers and a ram. So wethers are castrated rams that will be butchered in January. And that ram will then be like the backbone of our breeding stock going forward. We've had several big gardens over the last 4 years. We got a small garden now just due to lack of time with our new son and all that. We didn't want to get in over our heads like we've done so many times and
Yeah.
watch the garden get overgrown with weeds because you don't have time to get out there. And but yeah, I mean, it's a trial and error and learning experience. You're not just going to walk out there and do it right the first time, no matter how much research you do. And like Erin and I are overanalyzers. We'll do way too much research into something.
Chase is more than I am.
You just got to get out there and do it. You've got to get your hands in the dirt and do it yourself. It's the only way that you'll actually learn how to do it.
Yeah. And I will say, I don't know if this is really considered homesteading, but I feel like if you watch people like online, like they talk about this a lot. In April, I know that you're into this as well, but I did make a note, like whenever I started doing this and like looking into homesteading, I started cutting out like toxins, and I focus a lot on like low tox / no tox household items. Because I feel like if you're doing all of this for your health, you're raising your own food and you're doing all this, well, then you're not going to want to like bring literal poisons into your home. So that's another thing that I feel like we've really gotten into as well.
Yeah. And then fruit trees and berry bushes, we have tons of those. I just planted over 50 fruit trees from seeds. So maybe 5 years we'll get some fruit on those. Homesteading is a long-term game. Like you're not just going to have your perfect homestead next year.
No.
Like it's basically putting seeds in the ground and nourishing it till it's giving you fruit.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand. It's when you go into homesteading, it's not something, if you find all these, if you're a person who finds all these little trends and fads and you just want to jump on every little trend, and so homesteading is a trend, so you jump on it. That's not what homesteading is. And if you have that in your mind, just don't do it. You're wasting your time.
Well, you can try it in your neighborhood, like plant something. Don't sell your house and move to the country if you're not sure you actually want to do that.
Yeah, try something small. And that's the thing. You can start really, even if you're in an apartment, start growing some stuff in the windowsill. So start doing little things, which we'll talk more about in a moment. But before we get into the nitty gritty of some of those details, I want to know, we kind of talked about some of our story, but what's your why behind this? Like, why do you think it's important to homestead? Why do you think it was important for yourself? Why do you think it's important for people who maybe listen to this? Like, what's important about it? Why do it?
You start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think ultimately it's for the health of our family. I mean, wouldn't you say, Chase?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, one of the big reasons, physical health and mental health, and just, giving yourself like a purpose. So, I mentioned earlier, I'm not just coming home, and which I don't go to work anymore, but before all of this, I was just coming home, making the easiest dinner possible so I could sit on the couch and watch TV. I mean, honestly, that's what we were doing. Wouldn't you say, Chase?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not healthy at all. That'll probably take years off of your life. But I did make a note, just being in the dirt, being in the soil every day. I know a lot of people talk about like grounding, and there's all kinds of studies that go with that. But like gardening, getting your feet in the actual dirt, it improves your sleep. It reduces pain. It reduces your stress. You have a healthier nervous system. You have more of a heart rate variability, faster healing. Like I could just go on. And I got all of those notes from, I forgot her name. I think her name's Emily Morrow, the really very crunchy lady, if y'all have ever watched her videos.
It's the funny videos.
Yeah, she's very funny, but she came out with a book called Really Very Crunchy, and it's such a good book because it's funny and she's got a ton of statistics, but I got that from her. But it's so good for your health. And, it just teaches you discipline. I mean, it comes down to it. Like if you don't go out and do your chores, well, then all this work that you've put in, all this time and money is just basically gone.
Yeah. It forces responsibility.
Yeah.
Like it's mandatory. If I don't go out and feed my animals, they'll die. They need me to go do it. So I have to. Yeah. It forces me to be responsible. And also it encourages me to be more self-reliant in a world where everything is so convenient. Everything is basically begging me, hey, let me do that for you. Like I can have somebody go pick up my McDonald's for me. Like that is insane. That's so far from
I can't.
That's so far from my great grandfather's 100-acre farm where he grew everything his kids ate. Like all 10 kids, they grew everything. They had hundreds of chickens, and when they wanted chicken for dinner, they just go grab one and butcher it.
Right.
And like for the common American out there to picture that, like they get their frozen chicken tenders from the dollar store or from Walmart, and like they don't even realize this was a chicken just a few months ago, probably maybe a year, depending on what brands you're buying.
I remember when our daughter first found out that when we eat chicken, it's an actual chicken. It was like mind blowing for her. She's like, wait, what?
A lot of people could not take a chicken, kill it and butcher it and create a chicken tender if their life depended on it. And that's kind of scary to me in a world where not too long ago, the government encouraged us to have victory gardening.
It is scary. And that's, so a big thing for me on the why behind it. I think of my kids and I think about what life do I want my kids do I want to continue a generation where my children grow up and they're even, this is going to be the wrong word, but it's the right word at the same time. They're even dumber than my generation. You know what I'm saying? Where we've lost skills. We've lost the ability to do things.
Yeah. It's weird. Like just to butt in for just a second on that one point, like we understand more about the universe than we ever have, yet you can't butcher a chicken that people have been doing for thousands of years.
Yep.
We're so smart and so dumb at the same time.
We are. We really are. And that's and so I thought about my kids, and a big why for me was I want my children to have skills that, nobody else will have. And if something happens, my kids I know are going to be protected. It's for my children. It's not even so much for me, although it is. It's for future generations. Like and that's the thing you talk about homesteading being a long game. it's a long game in a lot of different ways. And one of those ways is I am not doing this just for me and my immediate family right now. I'm doing this so my children can teach their children who can teach their children. So down the line, if, when the world goes crazy, my family, I know, because we've instilled in them skills, will know what to do.
Right.
That's important to me. That's a big why on my side. Do you have a why behind?
Yeah, a lot of things. When I think about just like when I envision like raising my children, I don't want it to be like in a third story apartment. Like I feel bad because I don't want to sound like I'm like downing people who live in the city. If that's your thing, okay. But
Somebody's got to live there.
for me personally, I love being outside. I've always loved being outside. And Matt's always like, why are you outside?
She's always outside.
I love being outside. Now that the weather's warm, I'll be outside all day. Like I love being outside. And I want my kids to be outside. And it's funny because when I was researching, why is there this trend towards millennials homesteading? And a lot of the common theme, one of them was for health. Like a lot of these people had like cancer or diabetes, and they wanted to know where their food came from. So one of the reasons was health. Another reason was these people were getting up at the crack of dawn, driving to their cubicle, sitting in a cubicle all day, like not even leaving the building for lunch, hearing, like buzzing noises all day, getting back in the car, rushing home, having some microwave meal, barely seeing their kids. And they like dropped all that. And this one interview of this guy that I read said he works 10 times harder for less money, but it's worth it because he has connection to nature. He has connection to his family. He has strong family bonds. So like, he's like, I don't care if I'm making less money and the work is 10 times harder. Like he's outside in nature. He's not in this little cubicle all day. Like, I feel like as humans, we are meant to be outside, like sunshine on our skin.
Humans don't start in buildings. We didn't start in houses. We didn't start, the shelter's always been a part of the human culture to an extent, but humans spent the majority of their lives outside for most of humanity. And don't get me wrong, I'm fair skinned and redhead, and me and the sun aren't best friends. But at the same time, like there is a benefit. There is health benefits to being outside. Erin talked about just being in the ground, but just also being out in the sun. There's benefits from that. The vitamins you can get from that, just being in the fresh air. There's health benefits to it. There's also mental health thing. Being, that we lived up in Maine for a while, and during the winter months, you don't go outside because it's cold and
it gets dark at 3 o'clock.
Gets dark at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
In the winter.
And so you don't go outside. You don't spend much time outside. And they literally call it the winter blues. There's actually a mental health issue.
Like seasonal depression.
Seasonal depression is that mental health issues because people aren't outside.
Well, some people go outside and like ski and
we ski and snowboard.
Those are the people that stay happy year round.
Yeah.
But
that's not our climate.
So there's a reason we don't live there anymore. But it's important to be outside. There's health benefits to it. And this is how we were designed. God designed our bodies to be interactive with his creation, with nature. And you're right. Most people don't. Most people go to cubicles and go in the cars and get home, and maybe
kids don't go outside.
Kids don't go outside. And if they do, it's 5 to 10 minutes out on the porch and that's it. And it's just not what we were designed for.
Yeah.
Like we're not telling you how to live if you want to live that way.
I mean, do you, but
well, I did want to add to that, Matt. You said something about God's creation, and that's probably the most important thing out of all this. Like, this is God's creation, and it's our purpose to like cultivate it and just to be in his creation. And if you want to feel close to God, if you want to experience him and just enjoy his creation, then grow a garden and pick your own vegetables. Like, look outside and see how the hens take care of her chicks. Like, it's just amazing. Like, if you've ever butchered a chicken, if you've ever had to take a life, like, I know it's just a chicken, but it's just amazing. It's very hard. Like, if you haven't butchered a chicken or any kind of animal, it's very hard. I tried my best. I'm not very good at it. But like, I mean, that's the most important thing out of all this is, it's God's creation. And if you want to experience him, then just go experience his creation.
There's something about like we spend all of our days surrounded by man's creations. So like right now, we're completely surrounded by things that man made.
Yep.
There's nothing in here that God made naturally. But if you go outside, that's everything. God made everything out there.
Yeah.
Man didn't make anything. And there's something about that role reversal there.
There is. So I've been thinking about this recently. Romans tells us that all of creation like testifies of the glory of God. Like all of creation gives him glory. All of creation testifies of him.
Right.
Really, God gave us scripture and the Bible as his word to us. But in one aspect, creation itself is also a message from God to us. Mm-hmm. Yet so often we shut that message out and we don't get involved in nature. Even if you live, if you're the type of person, you like city living, you like not having a car and being able to get down, walk down the sidewalk and go somewhere, that's great. But get outside and go do something. I'm like, most cities have parks and things you can go do something to get out in God's creation. There's a whole message in creation God's given to us, and we often just shut our eyes to it. And like that's sad. If God gave it to us, why are we not exploring it and looking at it and enjoying it? And so that's important. And that kind of leads into another question that I had. Is there a biblical basis for the concept of homesteading? I mean, we kind of talked about creation, but is there any other biblical basis or idea behind homesteading that you find out of the Bible that is important?
Yes, there's a lot.
God put Adam and Eve in a garden.
But obviously Genesis there. Genesis 1 and 2, I'd say. The first thing man was tasked with was caring for and protecting a garden.
Yeah.
And we are supposed to go forth and take dominion of the earth and make it God's, basically. Go out there, work with God's creation to make it line up with how God wants it to. And that's working with the earth. And that's what we're doing in homesteading and any kind of farming is you're working with nature, with what God made, and you're taking your sustenance and getting what your family needs from it. It's working directly with God. Because like there's the parable Jesus told about how the farmer plants the seed, but he doesn't know how it grows. Like we've got I can't make a seed grow. I can give it fertilizer and things like that, but God makes the seed grow, not me. I don't have anything to do with it. And there's something spiritual about that, to touch back on we were talking about before. There's something spiritual about being in God's creation and working with God to feed my family. There's something really spiritual about it.
There is. And I just want to point out, you talk about creation, man being tasked with taking care of the garden and having dominion of the earth. A lot of people think the curse, because he cursed the ground, it says with hard work you will labor, and they think that working the ground and doing all that is actually part of the curse, but it's not. No. The curse wasn't working the ground. The curse was that the ground would resist against that work. It was always God's design for man to work and to tend the garden and to work the ground and to take care of animals. That was always part of God's design from the beginning with Adam and Eve. It was just that in their sin, in rebellion against God, the earth was no longer going to make it easy on them. And, it was going to be harder. And it was almost like the ground was going to rebel against the man having dominion over it, which is really what the whole curse is. It's God gave you dominion, but now because you've forfeited that, you're going to have to battle for that dominion. And so that's really what the curse is. And so this idea that working and doing, tending the garden and doing all that, that's part of the curse. We shouldn't. No, that's part of God's design.
And if you really, this is going to get controversial, but if you break that down, that means all of our modern conveniences are ways to get around the curse that God put on us.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I use the modern conveniences.
But
it's absolutely true. It's a way. It's really a counterfeit. There's not necessarily in and of themselves wrong, but it is an attempt to counteract the curse without going through Jesus. It's trying to avoid. You know what I'm saying? And it really is. And that's why there's an increase of knowledge and an increase of technology and increase. Scripture even talks about there being an increase of that in the last days. Honestly, this is why I think modern conveniences is a problem, it's not that convenience in and of itself is a problem, but we've become so accustomed to convenience because we don't like the hard work, and which works. So we use these conveniences to try to overcome the curse, we don't want to work hard. But hard work is something, I mean, the whole of the idea of the creation story, and I'm not going to get into the creation story in general, but the whole idea is it's portrayed as 6 days of work and it's 1 day of rest. Like the whole idea is portrayed as work, and that work is not a bad, evil word.
6 days you shall labor and do all your work.
You should. It's a command of God. Like, this is what you were supposed to do. And a lot of people think of, work is bad, but it's just not. And that's where work is good for you. It's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. We actually went through a thing where for a period of time, like I realized, like, okay, I need to do more work. Like, it's a weird statement, but me and April were talking, and like, I need to do more work. So I set my alarm and started getting up at 3:30 in the morning to start working and get work done.
Yeah.
And
well, you have like ADHD, so he needs structure. He needs to self-discipline himself to he needs rigid structure, or else he doesn't get anything done.
So I set a schedule. I'm like, I'm gonna get up at 3:30. I'm gonna get this work done. And in doing that, there's so much more happiness and more it's just healthy. Right. Is what I'm trying to say. Like,
you are happier now that you're on a stricter schedule.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, if you suffer from anxiety, you need to go outside. Yeah. It's where you don't want to go. Trust me. But you need to be outside with your hands in the dirt, working the soil. Like, just look up some studies on that. This is not woo-woo, like hippie stuff. Like, seriously, your body needs vitamin D from the sun, and you need to be in the soils messing with all those microbes out there. I'm not a scientist, but just look it up. Seriously.
Chase always worries that people are going to think we're hippies.
We're not hippies. Okay.
But I was going to add to that, like Proverbs talks a lot about laziness and how it will literally destroy you. Like in some versions, that's what it says, like laziness will destroy you. And then on the other hand, it says, well, hard workers, they'll be rewarded for their hard work.
Yeah.
And like in Proverbs 31, as women, that's important for me to know what it says about a Proverbs 31 woman. She provides food for her family. She works with her hands. She plants vineyards. She's definitely homesteading, if you want to say that.
Yeah. I feel like God, kind of to recap what you said, like it's innate inside of us to work hard. It's innate inside of us to be part connection with nature. Like, to be a lot of the people that I read their stories of why they wanted to homestead. They said they felt a connection to nature and they felt disconnected. And there's a big push, I feel like, back to homeschooling, homesteading, just home. And I feel like that's God's design, is family, home. And part of that is, homeschooling, homesteading, getting back to just nature and that connection. And we see a huge crisis in our country, a mental health crisis, physical, obesity is on the rise in children, cancer's on the rise, suicide's on the rise. Maybe some of the answers are just getting back to family and home, and it seems very oversimplistic. Go outside.
Yeah, but it's true.
And exercise and eat healthier. Like, I read some statistic the other day that said I forget what it was, some kind of cancer association. They're predicting 2 million people are going to get cancer this coming year, 2 million people. And I was like, maybe we should stop eating all this garbage.
Yeah.
And go outside and get sun and interact with our families. And
well, nobody wonders why all the food that's illegal in Europe is given to us here in America. Like, if you just Google a lot of the stuff, you go to Walmart, read all the little words on the back that have the ingredients on them. A lot of that stuff's illegal in Europe because it's killing people and causing cancer. That's why it's so cheap here in America. And that's why, all the red food dyes, all of that stuff, like, you can't get it in a lot of countries over there, but you can get it here in America, and it's making kids go crazy. Google that. I'm not being woo-woo. Remember, just look that
The
up.
word of the day is woo-woo.
Yes.
Just all you have to do is Google red dye causes kids to act up.
Chase is not a woo-woo hippie. He has science behind this.
Yeah.
But it's true. I've heard a lot of people say, like, if you are going to buy pre-made, pre-packaged food, like it should only have 5 or less ingredients, and you should know what those ingredients are. So I feel like that's a good rule to stick by if you want, pre-packaged food. But I did want to add to that, after I had my son, he's almost a year old. Like I literally, you can ask Chase, like I literally depended on getting outside for my mental health. Like people, like our family will joke and not really give me a hard time, but my son, he's like really tan because we go outside every day, multiple times a day. Because I know I'm not that tan, but he is.
Tan from
But I do it because it's good for him. But like also I rely on that because like it's just I walk outside, like Chase said, sometimes I don't want to. When it's almost 100 degrees outside, I don't want to. But like y'all know, like when you step outside, it's like literally breathing in life. Like sometimes that's what it feels like. So yeah.
And it's important.
Big advocate.
So speaking about family, you talk about, y'all having a kid and the homestead. I think there are a lot of people who think when you talk about a homestead, you guys kind of hit on it a little bit earlier that you do a lot, you'll share certain responsibilities. I think there's a lot of people who don't do homestead because they think about themselves having to do all this work. How do you get your family involved, and what are ways that you can share the responsibilities of homesteading with not just yourself? And I know y'all's child is young right now, so he's not he's not going out and just picking up the hay and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But
you don't know.
He will one day.
He will one day. But like even getting your children involved, what are some ideas of things that you could share that responsibility around and make it a family ordeal?
First off, it's really easy to get in over your head. You can get in over your head a lot quicker than you can get out of that over your head water. So just start slow if you're going to start. And don't take on more than you can do, for sure. Don't do that.
I did want to speak to, I'm sorry, were you finished with that thought?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll pick up after you're done.
Well, I wanted to speak on doing all this with a baby because I feel like it's very tempting to just say, oh, let's just wait till he's older and then we'll worry about all this. But I think if you have the mindset like, yes, this is going to take a lot, like really with anything, this is going to take a lot longer, but this is important for my son, for him to be raised in this environment. And there's definitely ways to do things. Obviously, like during nap time, we can do all kinds of stuff. But, just with laying a quilt in the grass and giving him some toys or putting him in a pack and play, or we have a carrier, Chase will put him on his back. It's really important for us to make sure he is involved, even being, almost 1. I know he can't do anything, but I feel like this is going to make it, he's out there with us. I feel like it's going to make it easier later on down the road.
And he loves it. He'd rather be outside than inside.
He doesn't even need toys. Just put him in the grass. He has the best time of his life.
When I've got him in the backpack carrier and I'm moving our sheep or something like that, his mouth is just open watching everything the whole time.
Yes.
He loves every second of it.
It's going to take longer to pack him up and get him out there, but it's worth it.
It is worth it because you're raising him where he's used to that.
Yeah.
So it's going to be completely normal when he is big enough to do things around and learn responsibility around the homestead and do things. It's to him going out there is normal. It's what you do. Mm-hmm. And raising them. And that's the whole, especially being that young. We didn't start when our kids were that young. Mm-hmm. And, I wish we had looking back on it, but
nobody was doing it back then.
Nobody was doing it back then. Right. And so we're not that old. No, I'm kidding.
Well, like 5 years ago, nobody was doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and you're right. But looking at it now, it's like, I can see the importance of, this is all they know. Like it's so good for them because it's not something you're trying to get them away from. Oh, we got to go outside and I want to sit here and play Minecraft. I want to sit here and play whatever. I mean, not that anything, if you want the kids to play Minecraft, that's one thing, but I'm just saying like your child's going to be.
Kids do play Minecraft.
But I'm just saying that you raise them up that way from the beginning. It's not like
hopefully you won't have issues.
Yeah, it won't be an issue because it's something they're used to. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he's not going to be scared of the animals. Like
Yeah.
he loves the animals. So yeah, that is a good point.
But that's any chore though, right? If you just spring doing the dishes on your kids, they're not gonna want to do it.
Right.
You're still gonna make them do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So if our son doesn't, or if any future kids doesn't want to do the minor farm chores, they're still gonna do it.
Absolutely.
You have to. There's no way around
this house.
Yeah.
You're gonna do it, but hopefully
you like to eat the food that we're growing, so
Right.
you get out there and help with it.
Yes, but I'm sure they can also find some things that they enjoy
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Like we're doing all kinds of
They
stuff.
need their own projects. They need to do things because like everything we're doing is stuff that we want to do.
Mhm.
So they need their own thing as well.
And that's what I was going to say. I think it's a very important thing on a homestead for your children to. There's all kinds of there's never a shortage of things that need to be done, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that even ideas that they could have, little things, big things, whatever, that they might have an idea of that they might be passionate about as their thing.
Yeah.
And I think especially with children, if you want to make your children have help around the homestead, you make them responsible. Kids always rise to the level of expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something we set such low expectation for children so often. And I think a lot of times,
especially our generation.
Yeah.
I feel like it started like when we were kids. Like our parents, at least my parents, when they were kids, they were expected to like pretty much take care of themselves when they got pretty old. It wasn't, but now when I was a kid, my mom like did everything for me and my sister.
Mhm.
And now it's like we're trying to break that.
Yeah.
At least I am. I'm like, okay, Hope, you're 9. You need to do this yourself. Like, okay, no, like you need to do this yourself.
Yeah, and it's we have a tendency to just lower our expectations for our children way down here. And 90% of the time, if you raise those expectations, they want to meet those expectations. They want to help. They want to be involved. And so if you set that expectation and give them responsibility and say, this is your thing, like you make them have ownership over it, they'll rise to that and they'll do it because it's something that's their thing.
Yeah.
And
you could give them their own garden bed.
Yeah.
You know, there's tons of little animals. Like they could raise rabbits, quail, ducks. There's all kinds of stuff, really.
Yeah. So many options.
Yeah.
The FFA has a lot of good stuff that you can show pigs,
Yeah.
show goats,
Steer.
show calves, all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
The little show pigs is really interesting to watch because they'll like get out there with a stick and kind of tap their nose and guide them. Make
Mhm.
those kids make some of the funniest faces.
That's funny. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah. So,
And I feel like today, maybe not every household, but today in America, it's like every kid's in their own room with the door shut on their device, and the dad's in one room on the TV and the mom's in the other room on the phone. But I feel like even if you don't have a homestead, if you just have like land and you get everybody outside, get your family outside doing something
go for a walk, go in the evening
together. Even now that summer, I watch a lot of stay-at-home moms on social media, and they're like, they can't get their kids out of their rooms, and I can't get my kid off of the Xbox. Well, unplug it and tell them to go outside.
Can't get them off.
But
That sounds like it
I
won't.
feel like that's so many. Even now, summer vacation, all the kids are in their own rooms with the door shut on a different device, and maybe they get them outside for an hour, and they take them somewhere to like a pool, or they sign them up for summer camp because they can't sit inside all day. And even then, you're not seeing your kids, and they're off some summer camp. Not that summer camps are bad. I'm not saying that. But it's just like, it's so everybody does their own thing in their own corner. And
if you could just, there's all kinds of things that can be done, like that need to be done. There's things that I think probably everybody, men joke around all the time. There's that honey-do list. Like, even if you're not, you haven't got a homestead up and running yet, but you still want to get your family involved in doing things, like, don't do a honey-do list where the husband has to do all these things by himself. Let's make this a family project, and let's do this together as a family. Hey, my kid may not be big enough to do these big projects, but they could carry me the tools I need to do it. They can, what I'm saying, just get them involved.
Get pull weeds or
weeds. I mean, you move rocks, little rocks out of the thing that you keep running over with the lawnmower.
Build a swing set, build a shed, a
yeah.
smoker. There's all kinds of DIY projects that will walk you through step by step on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
YouTube has changed the game.
You don't have to have any experience in carpentry to build things now.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy.
But the key is you just got to actually do that and make it a priority. And I think that's the key, is make it a priority to actually do things as a family like that. And if you make it a priority and you say, okay, everybody from this time to this time is project time. We're going to go work on this project. And it's just something you schedule into your structure. April talked about earlier. I do good with structure. And
I do too. It's okay.
You just, so just build it into our schedule. This is what I'm doing this evening from this time to this time.
Yeah.
Everybody just needs to decide, like, how do you want your kids to be as an adult?
Yeah.
What do you want them to know? How do you want them to act? And then raise them to create that person.
Yeah.
And also, you should try to be the person you want your kids to be as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like in a way, it's probably easy for everybody just to go to their own room on their own device and spend
Because
the whole
that's
day.
what we want to do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to lay in bed all day and watch YouTube or something like
But
that.
you say that, but I feel like if you did it long enough, like you wouldn't feel good. Like
No, definitely.
I would hate it.
Actually,
I feel miserable.
I actually heard this on a podcast last week, and the guy was like, "Yeah, everyone thinks they want to lay on the couch all day and watch TV and eat Doritos, but after a whole day of that, you feel gross.
Yes.
You don't feel satisfied. Like you don't feel productive. You don't
Especially
feel good about yourself, and you're like, "Ooh, I need to shower and I need to go outside and do something."
especially if you've ever had the thing where you've actually accomplished something and you felt that in the past, then you sit down and act that way. You miss that feeling of feeling like I've accomplished
like
something.
if you don't have any responsibilities, like going back to the beginning of this podcast, when we lived on our half-acre house and we just came home from work and watched TV, like that was just normal. I didn't really feel bad then because that's all we knew.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, I feel bad if I don't get enough work done on the weekend.
Yep.
I'm off for my day job. I feel bad.
I remember when we started our garden and you started building that chicken tractor. Like, I think that is the happiest we had ever been. Like, we just had so much, like, I don't know if it was the accomplishment of like working towards something, but it's a great feeling for sure.
It is. So then I'm going to kind of skip around for a minute. We got a couple more questions, but I'm going to jump to the last question for a moment because I think it ties in. Since we're talking about that feeling of accomplishment and actually getting something done and those type of things, what values and character traits does homesteading produce in you that you think is important for you, for your family? Like there's benefits. So we talked about some of the benefits, but beyond just physical benefits like health, beyond benefits for teaching, raising our kids and being self-sufficient, what character traits do you think it produces that's important?
I would say work ethic for sure. That's an obvious one, but also perseverance. I can't tell you how many projects I've started that I thought this was going to be easy. It's going to take an hour. And then 4 hours in.
He always tells me this is going to take 30 minutes. Okay. 2 hours later.
But who's going to do it?
Right.
Nobody. Me. That's who's going to do it. You have to get it done. You have to persevere. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's coming to do it for you. You have to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the biggest things that you'll learn. Homesteading, you can learn in other places as well, but farming, agriculture, doing anything on your own land is just a great way to learn that stuff. Mm-hmm. Obviously, extreme responsibility, like I said earlier. My animals, the garden, everything will die if we don't take care of it. The pastures will grow trees and will no longer be pastures if we don't manage them. It takes a lot of work, and you have to do it every day. That's what a lot of people that just watch the YouTube videos or they want to homestead, they don't realize, like, I spend at least an hour and a half every day doing something, and that's after my day job. And like as you get further and further along this, you find ways to make it easier on yourself. You do a little bit more work today so you can do less tomorrow. Like Thursdays, I'll usually work a little harder, so I have less to do on Friday nights or vice versa. You learn ways to kind of cheat stuff around, but the work's got to be done. You still have the responsibilities to get it done. Also, another really big one is gratefulness. Like when Erin takes one of our chickens that we butchered, or one was that we even had butchered out of the freezer, and she cooks it, and like we sit down and we eat that, I'm so grateful for that bird, for that meat that we're eating. I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful that we were able to do it.
Yeah, we're not throwing any of it out.
Yeah,
We make bone broth with it. We make 2 or 3 meals with just one chicken.
yeah. But even when we go to a restaurant or something and I eat their chicken, I'm grateful because I knew what it took to get that. It's not, this isn't just food. Like, I understand where this inanimate object came from. It was animate at one point, and somebody spent a lot of time to get that to my plate, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do y'all think?
I had a lot of the same characteristics as you did. Patience was one that I wrote on here. You have to be very patient. It's not just like instant, like, okay, you see the reward. It takes a long time to grow a vegetable, to make a loaf of sourdough, so patience to grow a chicken.
Yeah. Need a loaf of bread.
Yeah, Chase has kneaded a loaf in his day, so he knows.
Yeah. It takes a lot of patience.
Yeah. So like tying to the patience, I feel like just our tolerance for like frustration, like in our generation, especially in our kids' generation, is so low. I feel like everything just like frustrates us, aggravates us, annoys us, and we don't know how to work through frustration. Like when I was younger, my dad always worked on our cars. Like he barely ever went to a shop, and he would be under there for hours, so that we would be holding the flashlight and he would get frustrated, and he would just keep working through his frustration. Like frustration wasn't going to stop him. But now we have kids that if their game glitches, they flip out and throw the device across the room. They have no tolerance for frustration. Or we have, parents that rush in. They never have to build a tolerance for frustration because the parent runs in and fixes everything. But if you're like outside in like a garden and animals and stuff, I feel like your level of patience will rise and your tolerance for like frustration will rise. Like, I feel like that's something I really noticed even with like our daughter. I'm like, okay, her level, like what's the word? Like tolerance for frustration is, we need to fix that. Like we need to work.
It's really low.
Well, like kids, not your daughter, obviously, but kids have no need for patience when the next TikTok video, 3-second TikTok video is one swipe away. Like you do not need to be letting your kids do that. Like you're microwaving their brain with those short 3-second dopamine hits.
Yep.
First, like even the Pop-Tart goes down, the Pop-Tart comes up. It's like back in the day, the mom had to get up and make the bread and the kids had to go get the eggs and they had to do the breakfast and the kids had to milk the animals. Now it's like the toaster's not toasting my Pop-Tart.
It goes all the way back
to the oven if you have to.
Oven, that's so long. Like we have an air fryer because Luke doesn't want to wait for the oven for 20 minutes. So an air fryer does it faster. I just feel like we're losing so much with like our generation and then this next generation. There's no like tolerance for frustration because it's so easy. Everything is so simple and easy.
True.
And so people get like, that's why you see people flipping out in Walmart if the line's too long and they're like cussing and throwing stuff. And I'm like,
just calm down and be patient.
Everybody's rude now. Everybody's rude.
And it's due to us
even here in
no
the South
for frustration.
Even here in the South, everybody is rude now because nobody wants to wait.
Yep. I think
that was kind of a rabbit trail, but the point was like being outside and having to like the patience of a garden and the patience of trial and error and like frustration that of that kind of process of gardening and stuff isn't needed. I feel like life skill or trait, because I see really like in the generation of our children, I see it not just in our kids, but like they have no patience and no tolerance for any like, I mean, the game is taking too long to load and the internet is slow and it's like,
it's bad. I think a good trait that comes out of it, I don't know if you call it a trait necessarily, but it's a good thing. It's an appreciation for failure. I think that's important because nobody on this earth is perfect. So we're all going to fail at different times in various things in our life. And with homesteading, you try to grow something doesn't produce, something that you failed. Tried to build this thing and man, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it. Or, something, whatever, a something happened and something failed. Tried my sourdough starter, and dadgummit, it did not. It just died on me. I got to try to bring it back to life, right? Like there's this benefit of failure, because when you fail, it creates problem solving skills that we don't necessarily have unless you fail and need to try to fix something that failed. And so there's an appreciation for failure. And right now, I feel like our culture is taught that if you don't do good at something, like that's bad. And I think it's the opposite. I think if you don't do good at something, that can be a good thing because it can teach you what to change to do good at something. It can teach you problem solving skills. It can teach you things. So there's an appreciation for failures, not a, oh my gosh, I failed, I might as well just give up, forget this whole thing. No, oh my goodness, I failed. What can I do to do something different the next time? Most of the most successful people in the world are people who failed a million times before they became successful. And I think we have a generation, it kind of goes back to perseverance and patience, but we have a generation that when you fail, you give up, you're done. And I think if you're on a homestead, well, I can't just give up. Like you said, I got animals depending on me. I got to feed my family. I got to, so there is no just giving up. And so that failure turns from, oh, this is just terrible, I can't believe this failed. Why? To now I got to find a way to problem solve it. And that skill is extremely important to have, because it changes your whole outlook on everything in life. If something's wrong in my life, I don't look at it and say, oh, how terrible my life is. Instead, I say, oh, what can I do to solve it? Because you create those patterns of thinking on a homestead. Yeah. And I think that's a very important.
I can't tell you how many hours I have spent on projects for it to just have gone terribly. Like how many hours we've spent on tomato plants that have produced the worst tomatoes, or how many days I've spent canning something for it to just not set up or not seal, or how many days I've spent on sourdough for it to fail. But like you said, Matt, you kind of just have to like block that out of your mind. Like I can't dwell on that. All I can do is, take the next step forward. And now, thankfully, I've learned a lot from that, and I have had successful projects. But, we are dedicated to this. We've decided to go on this path, and you got to block that out of your mind and keep going. There will be failures. There will be.
And I think it's important to know that. And I think that's why homesteading is so important. It teaches you how to cope with that. I don't think there's many outlets, unfortunately, in a lot of our culture to learn to cope with failure properly, to learn to problem solve. There's some good out in sports. There's some different things. There's some good outlets, but very few, in my opinion, because we've created a culture where if I fail, it's so easy and convenient just to forget it and move on to the next thing and not even try again. And on a homestead, you learn that skill of not letting a failure stop you, but to problem solve from it. And so I think that's a very important skill. So I'm going to hit these last two. We'll wrap this up, but I'll hit these last two very quickly. We'll end with the seventh question. So we'll back up. I want to hit this real quick because I do think there's a lot of people who, when I got into when I got into homesteading and started thinking about homesteading, I was thinking about that because this question has to do with prepping. When I got into homesteading, I didn't actually start with homesteading. My brain was, oh my Lord, the world's going to end.
2020.
Everything in the world is terrible.
The world was ending back then, just for everybody.
As we knew
it was ending, yes. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get food stacked up. I need to go,
toilet paper.
I need to store stock up on toilet paper. I need to make sure that I have food. I need to make sure I have a bug out bag if I need to go. And
knives and guns
and whatever we need to have. And so a lot of people, I think, move into this whole way of thinking, but they start off in the idea of prepping and eventually find that homesteading is more beneficial for that end goal in any ways. And so I want to talk about, for those people, what is the difference between prepping and homesteading, and why would one, not saying either one's necessarily wrong. There's benefits to being prepared and having, being prepping and doing those. There's benefits to that. But why do you think homesteading is more valuable as a long-term goal than just prepping.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, I want you to start.
The expert. Chase
My notes on
Davidson.
this question says, let Chase answer.
I didn't even write anything down.
Well, the best way to answer this question is the motivations are different from preppers and homesteaders. Not that, like Matt said, one's right or one's wrong. You can be whatever you want. I'm not telling you what to do. But there really is a Venn diagram almost in the practicalities of either one, of homesteading and prepping. But your motivation, why you're doing it, is probably different. So in my mind, a prepper is somebody that's trying to be ready for the end of the world. They're whether that's a government breakdown going off. I don't know if we're allowed to say that with World War III about to kick off right now, but
I'll click the censor button.
Y'all just bleep that. Bleep, bleep. But they're getting ready for the end of the world. They have enough food and guns. They're ready to hole up with just them and their families and survive whatever's coming. They're not really concerned about community or maybe making the world a better place. They're trying to be ready for the crazy world that's coming. And right, you look out at the news right now, and you can't blame anybody for doing that, right? A homesteader, at least in my mind, on the other hand, is trying to become less tied to the crazy world we have right now. Because the world's crazy right now. Homesteaders are trying to become less reliant on that right now. We want to make our families more resilient and self-reliant, while understanding that community is necessary. Like, none of us are going to be able to just hole up in a bunker for the rest of our lives. And would you even want to begin with, if you really think about it? So community is more important to homesteaders, and focusing on improving the world we live in now. So a prepper mindset would be getting ready to weather the storm, and homesteaders would be thinking more along the lines of, how can I make my situation better right now?
Yeah.
I guess that would be the way I put it. And there's a lot of overlap between the two. The actual tasks and the practices of homesteaders and preppers can be really similar. At least if preppers do enough research, they'll realize you don't want to eat MREs for 20 years. You're going to need to farm. And if you're a prepper out there and you haven't started growing things, and your plan is to just start once the world ends, you're probably going to perish. Like we just finished the conversation on failure.
Yeah.
You're not just going to walk out into the mountains and live off the land out there. We talked about the old times earlier. In the Great Depression, white-tailed deer were almost hunted to extinction in this country and that was back when everybody knew how to farm.
Yeah.
Imagine nowadays, white-tailed deer will be extinct. That's why they created the DNR service and all the game wardens, because all the people in the Great Depression almost hunted all the deer out.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think you're going to go out in the mountains and live out there, you're probably not going to make it very long. You and everybody else in your county is going out there.
Yeah.
So I would consider myself more of a homesteader. I would say I want to improve the world around me right now, and make my family's life better, while being less tied to the government, less tied to the world that is trying to pervert my morals.
Yeah, I would say, I agree with that completely. I would say, like you said, there is overlap, but I think a homesteader, I think a prepper, they're thinking of being prepared is the idea of having everything I need, like materially, whereas a homesteader is thinking about being able to produce anything I need. And I think that's a big difference. I think a prepper, I need to have my go bag. I need to stockpile food. I need to have, all this stuff ready to go when the world ends. And a homesteader is thinking, I want to be able to produce whatever I need if the world ever ends. And if it doesn't, I'm producing my own stuff now.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's a difference between it's a now versus then mentality, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
prepping is looking at then, homesteaders are looking at now.
Mhm.
And if I can do it now, then I can do it then. So I ain't got to worry about then.
Right.
I need to worry about now.
Yeah.
And so it's the mentality shift of, like you said, if you're not going to be able to do it, if you're just prepping and you're not going to survive long term,
Mhm.
you're just not going to do it.
Or you might, but it might just be you and your family, and you're going to let all your other loved ones starve.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
can't do that. You're not. You might survive, but most preppers, let's be honest, most preppers aren't, because most preppers aren't actually doing the things that they would need, the skills they would need to survive.
Mhm.
Most preppers are not really preppers.
Mhm.
They're posers.
Poser.
Well, you
They
can't,
are.
you can't buy your way out of
Right.
a bad situation.
Right. There's a lot of people who buy a bunch of guns, buy a bunch of ammo, buy a bunch of food, buy a bunch of stuff, have zero skills in how to
Yeah,
actually
the
use that
skills,
stuff, how to
these
survive.
skills.
And so, yeah, you homesteaders, I feel like and this may sound bad because I'm not trying to, if you're a prepper and you don't want homestead, okay, that's on you. That's
Oh, we'll hammer on the homesteaders in a minute.
yeah. But I do feel like homesteading is a graduation point for prepping, if that makes sense. And that sounds bad because it sounds like I'm telling all the preppers out there, if you're not homesteading, you're doing it wrong. But I'm not. I'm just saying, I feel like prepping is kind of an entry level into this whole mindset of self-sufficiency, but it's not the graduating point. It's not the end point.
Mhm.
The end point is to be able to have the skills and to be able to do it now, have everything I need, be able to garden now, be able to do all that now. That's the end point. The end point, prepping is preparing for the end of the world. Homesteading is preparing for a new civilization. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it.
Like it's
Yeah.
two different things. I'm not preparing for this civilization to end. I'm preparing to start a new one if necessary.
Yeah.
And I have the skills to do that.
Yeah. And I think too, like to jump on and start, I'm sorry, did y'all have something you wanted to say to that? Okay. Just to kind of flip it around,
Yeah.
because I don't want to be just mean to the preppers out there.
No.
I like being mean to everybody, equal opportunity meanness. There's a lot of naive homesteaders who think
There are.
that they're just going to grow food for their family and nobody's going to come take it from you.
Mhm.
Like there are people out there who are very prepared with, I don't know how like, I don't want to get too far into that. That's probably not this podcast, but they're going to come take your stuff and it's not going to be good. Like,
You need to be prepared. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yep.
there are things that you need to do. It goes beyond just growing food and like living in a hippie commune. Because
Woo woo.
That word again.
If
I'll be a hippie. I don't care.
if you're woo woo, you're not going to survive.
We'll just be the hippies without the drugs.
Yeah, there you go. I'm okay with that.
yeah, but I mean, there's flaws in both sets of mentalities, I would say.
There is, and you can fall in the pitfall in both. The truth is, the best place is the marrying of both. It's like both concepts coming together is a really good thing. So, last question then. What is the best way? If someone's watching this and they're listening, they're like, yeah, I want to homestead. I want to get involved in this. I want to start doing something. What's your advice on starting? What's
Okay,
the
I got
best way
some
to
good
start?
advice.
Go ahead, Erin.
Just start. You can research all day, every day for years, but just start. Make your priority list, what you want to do, figure out what your budget is, because it can be extremely expensive, but it doesn't have to be. We don't spend a ton of money. But just start, watch some YouTube videos. I'll tell you, if you want to learn how to cook from scratch, Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone, watch her videos. That's who I learned from. And
Changing.
really, I'm serious. I know she's never going to hear this, but I have to give her credit. I feel like I know her. And then Jill Winger from the Prairie Homestead. She'll teach you about cooking, gardening, stocking your pantry, butchering animals. That's my two go-tos right
I
there.
actually met her at the Homesteaders of America
Yeah, we
conference.
can brag about that. We met her.
Yeah.
And then Sally Fallon and her Wise Traditions, her whole company, her book, Nourishing Traditions. If you want to learn more about healthy, like non-toxic stuff, she's a good resource. But just start. There will be failures like we talked about, and that's fine. just start. There'll be some failures and just keep moving. That's my advice.
Yeah, I'm going to say the best, and obviously gardening is a good, excellent place to start. You're not going to kill anything that's alive by gardening, and you can do it in a very small space. If you have a little bit of space, even like a quarter acre, less than a quarter of an acre, I would do probably meat chickens if it was me, or egg chickens, or both.
Really, just chickens.
Yeah, chickens are a great place to start. Rabbits are as well. But chickens, you can raise a year's worth of meat for your family in 8 weeks in your backyard. Fairly easy. And you can just look up pastured poultry. Guys like Joel Salatin have been doing it for decades. He's kind of the guru on that. He's got a lot of books. But that's where I would start, is meat birds. Rabbits, I'm really interested in getting into rabbits in the future. It's the inputs, and this is like a lot of fancy terms, but the inputs required for rabbits, you can get more of them from your farm than chickens. So chickens require a lot of off-farm inputs, which raises your how much you have invested in each bird. So rabbits require less off-farm inputs, which means cheaper meat, and they reproduce quicker. They actually reproduce. Like if you get the Cornish cross chickens, they don't reproduce. I don't want to get too far into that because all that's controversial too. But rabbits are a good place. Sheep eventually is what I would suggest everybody get. But I'm pretty biased on that. Pigs have been the easiest animal we've ever raised.
Mm-hmm.
There's hundreds of different ways to raise pigs. But again, they require 100% off-farm inputs pretty much, depending on how you raise them. So yeah, I would start with chickens or rabbits. Just it's not as hard as you think it is. If you've ever had a dog, that's probably harder than raising chickens.
Yeah, it is for sure. When we lived on our half an acre, we had everything was in the front yard. We had a garden at the front, and then we had a chicken tractor that we just moved around the grass. So it's possible for sure.
Yeah, you can do it. Well, I'll let you give your advice first before I wrap up.
Oh, yeah. So it was probably 2 years that I was just reading all these books about homesteading and gardening. And I got so overwhelmed, and I'm very analytical. I was I have to have a compost pile, and I don't know how to turn compost. And
we still don't have a compost.
And I was we have to build all these big raised garden beds. And I'm thinking, Matt's not going to do that right now. And I can't cut wood. I was so far ahead. And then Matt's just go get some 5-gallon buckets from Lowe's and start there.
Drill holes in the bottom.
That's what I did. So last year I grew tomatoes in 5-gallon buckets, and they grew really good. And I got lots of tomatoes, and they were the best tasting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I bit into that tomato, I just bit into it like an apple. It was the best tomato I've ever eaten. I was so excited because I did it all by myself. I started inside with seedlings, and I grew a tomato. And it was
There are
amazing.
people, that's all they do is grow in 5-gallon buckets. Container gardening is really big, and it's easier. You don't have to weed.
Yeah. I just watered in the morning, and sometimes if it was really hot, I watered at night, and it was very easy.
We have 6 raised beds that I put together with what are they? They're 2x12s. So I got 2x12s. You cut one of them into 4-foot lengths for the sides, and you just screw them together, and they've lasted 5 years. They're super cheap. Mm-hmm. They're not going to last forever because they're wood, but it's lasted however long we've been doing it. So,
but you don't have to have raised beds. Just till the ground and plant the seeds in the ground.
Yeah, just do it. You do need to do some research, but you don't need to, analysis paralysis, right?
That's what I had. Analysis paralysis.
You don't want to do that, but I think the key, and for anybody wanting to get started, the key is start small. Don't feel like you got to have, Chase said something earlier, it's very important. He said, you're not going to have your ideal homestead next year. Mm-hmm. And you have to have that in your mind. If you can have that in your mind, that this is a long-term commitment and a process that I'm just starting, then you should be okay with starting small, because just because it's small now doesn't mean it'll always be small. Who knows where this will take you in the future? Mm-hmm. But for now, just start small. Start with one animal, chickens. Start with 5-gallon buckets and tomato plant. Start something, and then next year say, okay, this next year, I'm going to commit to doing 1 or 2 more things. And then the next year, 1 or 2. By the time a few years have passed, it's grown to something that you've built over time, and you've learned from each step of the way. Start, even if it's as simple as, okay, maybe all I just want to do is start with a sourdough starter. That's it. That's all I'm going to do this year, is because I'm scared. I'm nervous to get involved. Start with a sourdough starter. Once you make your first loaf of bread that you made with your own hands, I'm telling you, there's something about that it just,
it's hard to eat other bread.
It is. And then you're like, okay, this I grew with my own hand. That gives you a boost to say, okay, I'm going to do something else with my own hands.
You buy a loaf of bread from the store, it tastes plain after you get used to sourdough.
And it's not as filling. Sourdough bread is filling.
Yeah.
You eat just that white bread from the supermarket, it is not filling.
No.
If you live in an apartment, I think if you're willing to devote the space to it, which you probably are if you have listened this far into the homesteading podcasts, but go get some of the metal shelving from Lowe's, order some of the grow lights, and you can grow vegetables inside. You can look up, I can't remember his name, but they do microgreens. You can do all that inside. You can grow vegetables inside if you have the UV or the grow lights. Just YouTube some of those setups. You don't need much space. I would grow, never mind, I'm not going to tell you what to grow, but grow whatever you want, have fun with it.
Or
Research yourself.
Yeah, or you don't have to grow anything. Just go to the farmer's market and get some vegetables. You can can some vegetables. You can ferment the vegetables. You can just experiment cooking from scratch. I mean, if you don't have a ton of money to invest, just start small like that.
If you have a ton of money, reach out to me and I will grow all of your meat and
We'll do
vegetables.
it for you. Yeah.
That's our new business.
But seriously, yeah. But if you're local to me, I can give you some of my starter. Just let me know.
Yeah.
If you
But
would
we're
know
not
me
telling
personally.
people where we live, Erin.
No, I mean, if you know me personally, I'll happily give you some starter.
Yeah. And I think if you're interested in like homesteading, if you're interested in homeschooling and stuff, like it's a mindset shift of when you go into the grocery store, okay, let's get less processed, let's get more natural. And it over time, like one thing I've learned from Erin is Erin doesn't waste anything.
No, I don't.
And that's really good, especially with the economy the way it is. I have been guilty in the past of like not freezing stuff, just going out through the refrigerator and throwing it away. Now I'm like, Erin would freeze this.
I'll say, just stick it in the freezer. It's fine.
Which is good. Like I used to just, if we made coffee and no one drank it, I would dump it out. Now I'm like, put it in the refrigerator, save this coffee, drink
Iced coffee. Yeah.
It's nice coffee.
But like your grandparents, they went through the Great Depression. They never threw anything away. Like they never wasted anything. I mean, they saved everything. And now I feel like our generation, our kids' generations, like everything just goes in the trash. Like they didn't finish their plate and they throw it in the trash. I'm like, no, put that in the refrigerator. You can eat it tomorrow.
That's what I do. Yeah.
For lunch. So it's a mindset shift of, training yourself to think differently.
Yep.
Or feed your scraps to your animals.
Yeah. So if you have animals, feed your scraps. Part of being more self-sufficient is training your mind to save and more
reduce waste.
Yes, because our
Reduce
culture is just throw it all in the trash.
Yeah.
Throw it all in the trash.
So even if you start, I mean, there's a million different ways. We kind of given you a bunch of different ways to start. The key is just start doing something, no matter how small. And don't think your small beginning is insignificant, because it's not. You're learning, you're growing, you're teaching, you're teaching yourself a new skill. Even if it's just one new skill. And if you start there, it'll grow and scale over time. And next thing you know, you're a lot more self-sufficient than you used to be. But it's just one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope this has been helpful, giving you some information on homesteading, kind of telling you our journey a little bit. And
got any questions, reach out to us.
Yeah.
I love these topics. I could talk all day about this stuff. If you want to see any other videos about these topics, just let us know.
Yeah, comment down below on YouTube and let us know what you think. Is there another specific question you'd like us to do a video on? Or if you just have questions that we can respond to and type back, let us know. But anyways, hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see y'all next time.